represents him in his aspect of God, of life and death. Interestingly, his feathered serpent's final resting place, if that is what it is, forms a rock cavity or catacomb, similar to those carved by ancient Phoenicians and Libyan peoples. The cult of the dead, especially the entombed kings and saints, still exist among the modern Berbers in the practices of Maraboutism. Like the god Pan in ancient Greece, Quetzalcoatl is unique for having both a birth and death. He first appears as a culture bearer in a ship arriving from the east, bearded, clad all in white, and wearing a distinctive conical hat. Later, he is identified with the son of the Toltec emperor, Mixcoatl. Beginning in the 7th century, the Toltecs were ruled for 9 generations by priest kings with the name Quetzalcoatl. The first of these was honored for having overturned the practice of human sacrifice, a religious rite of the Phoenicians, but later he was assassinated by enemies opposed to his reforms. In another myth, Quetzalcoatl sails off toward the rising sun, promising one day to return. In Yucatan, he is called Kukulkan. Moctezuma, the Aztec emperor of Mexico at the time of the Spanish conquest, was well versed in the prophecies about Quetzalcoatl and thought the foreigners to be the returning white gods of legend. The so-called Jornada style of rock art and pottery decoration in the Southwest includes numerous representations of Quetzalcoatl, as well as another important Mesoamerican figure, Choc, the goggle-eyed rain god. Choc is thought to be the chief deity represented in Hopi and Pueblo Cachinas, the rain-bringer who once demanded human sacrifice. Those Phoenicians again. Quetzalcoatl is affiliated with fish, travel, trade, agriculture, and fertility. Quetzalcoatl becomes the horned or plumed water serpent of the Pueblo Indians, patron of rivers, springs, and irrigation. He is recognizable in the Hopi sky god, who wears a single horn or high cone when masked and hat-shaped like a star when unmasked. The mask is another emblem associated with these foreign gods. In their Kachina rainbringer rituals, Hopi and other Pueblo Indians incorporate both masks and crosses. Through these correspondences, a historical overlay of Mexican religion on the Hopis, original Egyptian and Greek culture, begins to crystallize. Quetzalcoatl replaces Osiris and fulfills the same purpose of resurrection and bringing of the rains and floods for crops. In Hopi spirituality, Osiris transforms into Masa. Both are gods of the underworld and judges of the dead. One of the most familiar scenes in Egyptian religion, shown repeatedly in copies of the Book of the Dead, was Osiris weighing of the deceased person's heart. The heart is ideally balanced by his prayers in the shape of a feather, the origin of our expression, light-hearted. Entry into the afterlife is guarded by Osiris in the form of a mummy, one with the uncanny likeness of Masa. The deceased soul, Ka, embarks on the reed ship of the sun to the underworld, much as the Hopis travel also in reed boats to reach the other side of the world. Like a resurrected Egyptian in the Elysian fields, the devout Hopi is rewarded by ample rains, fertile, fruitful fields, and an eternity of plenitude. Hopi cloud terraces are the same as the Egyptian staircase to heaven. The water birds, Bennu in Egyptian, Phoenix, and other symbols of the Nile in its aspect of constant renewal are reflected in Hopi pottery designs, as are multitudinous other elements of Egyptian religion. What then is to be made of Kokopelli, the humpbacked flute player so pervasive in southwestern Indian art? Chaco Canyon is a complex of ruins on the other side of the Jemez Mountains from Bandelier. Like Bandelier, it is seen as a part of ancestral Pueblo history, and assigned to between about 1000 and 1250 CE. Lying at a latitude of 36 degrees north, longitude 108 degrees west, with an elevation exactly 1 mile high, its bone-dry red rock canyon falls in the center of the San Juan River drainage area. Chaco Wash is a deeply etched arroyo that flows only after heavy rains. When these occur, water jets down the walls of the mesa into the village. The growing season is short, always less than 150 days, and often less than 100 days, not a productive place for corn. Wood resources are scarce, and the surrounding desert exhibits only the rare clump of pygmy juniper or rabbit brush. According to archaeologists, climate in the centuries when Chaco culture flourished was not much different. So, what is it doing here? Following the circuit road, one first comes to the Great House, or outlying apartment building of Hungupavi, Reed Spring. The name is thought to be the same as Shinopavi, one of the mother villages of the Hopi on Second Mesa, a name we can now derive from ancient Egyptian Rush, and it is. Next on the visitor's route is the elevated Great Kiva of Chetroketl, a Navajo corruption of Quetzalcoatl. After that comes Pueblo Bonita, a ruin of 700 rooms within D-shaped perimeter walls up to 3 stories high. Sighting down a long ceremonial avenue leading back to Hungupavi, one cannot but be struck by the distant silhouette of a giant figure formed by the shadows in the cliff. 100 feet tall, it appears to be Kokopelli, complete with hunch, flute, and triangular hat or horn. Chaco may have been built where it was, and how it was, because of the striking shadows on its canyon walls. Certainly the choice of location owes much to the Libyans, with their cliff-dwelling habits and knowledge of irrigation. Kokopelli, like Quetzalcoatl, is a rainbringer, culture bearer, and peddler or merchant. The gates, walls, and sightlines of Pueblo Bonita emphasize view of the city's patron saint. Cosmopolitan Chaco lasted perhaps a little over 6 decades in the 11th century, with successor sites at Aztec ruins to the north and Casas Grandes in the south ending a bit later. After the Pueblo Indians had shaken off its aristocratic rulers, they retained memories of Chaco as a dark place, ruled by a people who had enormous amounts of power, spiritual power, and power over people. The shadows of Chaco Canyon were responsible for a determined democracy in tribal affairs ever afterward. The reason Cocopelli is often shown in a recumbent position in petroglyphs is not because he is in bed, but because he's dead. Impelled by years of drought, civil and political turmoil, and invasions by Athabascan and Aztec hordes from the north, the Hopi returned to Oraibi and the Three Mesas, where they are now located in the 14th century. The earliest date for Old Oraibi, as established by three-ring chronology performed on its wooden timbers, is 1150 CE. Elders quoted in the Book of the Hopi speak of the 1200s and 1300s as a time when other groups such as the Badger clan were gathered in after petitioning for admittance. They say that the Navajos and Apaches did not arrive in Hopi territory until one generation before the Spanish, 1580. Enter now the elder white brother. According to tradition, Masaw gave the Hopi 4 tablets to safeguard as their original instructions. The Sun Clan tablet applies primarily to the members of that clan. The Hopi are mostly silent about the symbols on it, but they insist that a now-lost elder white brother was given a corner and charged with returning after being sent to the east. I believe the headless person they interpret as a wicked chief, beheaded as a warning not to disobey their covenant, is not that at all. In ancient Libya, rulers were buried without their heads. It was a sign of royalty and even divine status. Surely this is a depiction of a Libyan expedition's leader or governor. Note that the figure is within a cartouche, the shape reserved for a pharaoh's name. The inscriptions on the tablet could probably be read as Numidian by an expert in that script, which I am not. In ancient times, a bargain or promise was sealed by breaking a tablet, stick, or other object, so that a later match between the two parts would identify the rightful partners when the contract was fulfilled. Elder Brother was sent with instructions to look for the missing members of the original migration, those whom history would know as the Cherokee. We lose track of them somewhere about Oklahoma. Among the usual finds, Gloria Farley describes in her book, In Plain Sight, is a stone pulled out of the family's farmland by curious 11-year-old Brent Gorman of Warner, Oklahoma in 1971. It was identified by Barry Fell as a Libyan boundary stone in the Numidian alphabet. His translation of its script, which resembles that of the Sun Clan tablet, was land belonging to Rada. A discussion of the Warner stone was published in Fell's book, America BC, and its Numidian writing system, and the interpretation of the latter were confirmed by visits from surprised scholars at the universities of Tripoli and Benghazi in Libya. The stone is now in the permanent collection of the Kerr Museum in Poto, Oklahoma. John Red Hat Duke, 1930 to 2002, was a Cherokee elder enrolled both with the United Kituwa Band and Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma. A member also of the Kituwa Society, he converted to Judaism as a teenager and became a Levite priest, making his aliyah and achieving Israeli citizenship under the law of return. Both full-blood grandmothers spoke the old Southern Kituwa dialect. He was a strong believer in the Lost Tribes of Israel theory of American Indian origins. Red Hat came to the attention of Hopi elders at Oraibi in the 1960s because he apparently fulfilled Hopi prophecy, which stated that one day the true white brother would arrive from the largest Indian nation, bringing a new religion from the east and wearing a red hat or cloak. The Cherokee are the most populous Indian nation, and they are located east of the Hopi. The last Kikmungwe, or High Chief Mike Lanza, declared the prophecy fulfilled, except for one detail. The Bahana was to return the missing corner of the Sun Clan tablet, which John Duke failed to do. Chapter 2. Secret of the Kituwa Priests. Nice contradiction between fact and fact will make the whole read human and exact. Robert Graves, The Devil's Advice to Storytellers. Don't the Cherokee have a creation story like the Hopi in Arizona, Algonquin tribes, or other American Indians? Don't they have a uniform mythology, similar to the Romans, Greeks, and British, with their traditional epic foundation stories? Or for that matter, Americans with their tales of the Pilgrims, and Lexington and Concord, and Declaration of Independence? As it turns out, the answer to this question is yes, they do. The secret of the Cherokees has been placed right in front of us all the time, and in fact, published. It is widely known that the Cherokees had writing with the so-called Sequoian syllabary, that they were literate from an early period of their existence. What is not well known is that they had schools, learned societies, oral traditions transmitted from generation to generation, and even universities. At a time when most of the country lacked public schools and universal schooling requirements for children, the Cherokee built colonnaded brick campuses for males and females in the scrub hills of Indian Territory. Since the 1820s, the Cherokee have maintained bilingual newspapers, published in their own language and unique syllabary. In 1880, the Cherokees of Oklahoma received their first full-fledged institution of higher education when the American Baptist Home Mission Society started Indian University in Tahlequah. Renamed Bacone University, it eventually developed a press. One of the press's first publications was a slender little octavo-sized book titled A Cherokee Vision of Elo, based on a report in the newspaper Indian Chieftain by Cornsilk, Cherokee name of William Eubanks, and rendering the deposition of Sakia Sanders, a member of the secret priestly society of the Kituas in the 1890s. This Cherokee History of the World, as the original title may be literally translated, tells of a unique heritage of history, spirituality, and prophecy in a matter sensitive to native understanding. The document narrates in Cherokee and English on facing pages the story of the travels of 12 original clans to North America across a large western body of water that can only be the Pacific Ocean. They migrate to escape overcrowding and frequent floods in the old country. Before leaving, the Cherokees, whom the document names Cherokee, build a store reaching to heaven, but this is destroyed by the gods. According to Kituwa text, other red tribes or clans to the Cherokee tribe began to come also from the old country, and in the course of time, the old pathway which had been traveled by the clans was cut, broken, by the submergence of a portion of the land into the deep sea. This path can be traced to this day by the broken boulders. This was no surprise to the clans, as they were used to the workings of the floods. For many years after establishing their new homes, the settlers searched for the missing 5 clans. Unable to find them, they gave up and established a new system of 7 sacred clans to the tribe. From that day to this, they have been searching for the 5 lost clans of the Cherokee. At some point in the Cherokees' wanderings, it is not clear when or where a black race of terrible invaders came in boats over the sea. The first wave is repulsed by the Cherokee warriors, as are thousands upon thousands of them, until the Cherokees discover the poison of a dragon, the dread Uktena, to kill them and to prevent any further eruptions. After that, they live for ages in peace, and the knowledge of the war with the Dark Invader became, in the course of time, only a story. Brian Wilkes, an expert on the Cherokee language and traditions, says there were 4 invasions of the old land, called Elohimona in song. On the 4th invasion, the Cherokees used the monstrous Uktena's venom, but in doing so contaminated the land and rendered it unfit for habitation. The poison destroyed the invaders, but the land was so devastated, it soon afterward sank into the ocean. Such a chain of events could well pass today for a fable of environmental disaster. The rest of the text describes the coming Europeans, whom the Cherokee welcome at first, but soon discover to be a race of deceit and cunning. Christianity is called the writing of a strange teaching that the white invader claimed to have spoken from heaven, the truth or untruth of which the red tribe had to find out for themselves. Notably, there are multiple waves of white people landing in North America in this version of history, suggesting a much deeper time frame than 1492, the date most of us are fixated on for entry of Europeans into the Americas. 12 divisions of the Cherokee are presented. It is likely that the Cherokee clans came from different homelands in the old country. According to tradition, their 7 clans reflect occupational castes of warriors, foragers, hunters, builders, healers, priests, and messenger diplomat. As for the floods in the Kituwa origin story, these details agree with the ancestral homeland of the Cherokees, described in their ritual recitation at the Green Corn Dance, where keepers of sacred stories perform enormous feats of memory annually with the help of wampum belts for the benefit of the young people. This origin place of the Cherokees contained great snakes and water monsters, for which reason it was supposed to have been near the seacoast. According to anthropologists, another Cherokee tradition, similar to the Hopis, tells of a single devastating flood triggered by earthquakes. The Kituwa text mentions a store reaching to heaven, destroyed in the old homeland. The Tower of Babel myth, as has been revealed by recent ethnographic research, goes far beyond Mesopotamia and the Fertile Crescent. It has roots in the Far East. Oxford genetics professor Stephen Oppenheimer derives tales of a primordial tower built in defiance of heaven from a civilization situated east of India and even Burma, evidently an Austronesian one. In the Kituwa account, we are told of invasions by a fierce race of black men. This detail seems puzzling at first, since, according to Cornsilk, or Sanders, the Cherokees' lost ancestral home lies beyond the western shores of the Pacific Ocean. Although called dark and black, the invaders do not seem to be Africans. They're said to come from the west. They arrived by sea. In this Cherokee religious narrative, we read that the ancient worship of the wise ones of heaven was brought over from the old country, beyond memory, and reorganized in the new country, America, as the ancient religion. Once the last wave of invaders, the white men, gain a foothold and begin dispossessing them from their land, the Cherokee are ultimately driven to the seashore of the west coast, where they will cross the waters, landing in the old country from whence they came. There, they will find the 5 lost clans, became reunited into 12 clans, into one people again, will become a great nation known as the Cherokee of the half-sphere Temple of Light. A word that leaps from the page in this strange account is Katius, the half-sphere temple of light, glossed as possibly a reference to townhouse. It is left in its original language, whatever that might be. Obviously, it was an enigma to the Cherokee editors. Katius provides an important and authentic clue to the origin of these seaborne migrants, with their institutions of multiple gods, temples, flags, and council houses. If Katius is a foreign word, as it appears to be, what language does it come from? Suggestively, almost letter for letter, it is Doric Greek. The literal meaning is a sitting down, which fits well in the context of the Kitwa text. It is the standard Greek name for an assembly hall. These public buildings were often constructed in a circular shape to emphasize egalitarian principles. The assembled citizenry, arranged by tribe and clan, sometimes reclined on bench-like couches or rafters, as do American Indians even today, and as do Jews once a year when celebrating a Seder. The word applies well to a rotund style of architecture, whose social function as a dome-shaped place of worship evokes the southwestern American Indian kiva, as well as the Cherokee council house, familiar to us from 18th century travelers' accounts. The use of columns is especially telling, as is the forthright use of the word temple. The Doric Greek architecture of the tolos seems pertinent here. In its classic shape, the tolos consisted of a circular drum of columns, covered by a parasol-shaped roof, supported by internal wooden posts. The form also appears in tombs, and is notable in the monumental national architecture of Washington, D.C. An important part of the ceremonies conducted in both the Cherokee Council House and Temples of Apollo was to introduce young men who had come of age in the intervening year into the community to take their rightful position in their clan, phratry, fraternity, military unit, priesthood, or other social division. The same function was, and is, fulfilled each year in the southwestern Indian kiva. Although called a heptagon, the Cherokee National Assembly Hall was seven-sided, only in a figurative sense. In actuality, it was octagonal. Inside, along the eighth wall in front, sat the peace, or white chief, and war, or red chief, flanked by assistants and counselors, with a screen separating the public or profane space from the sacred area or inner sanctum behind them. The medicine bundle, or Ark of the Nation, was kept here in the same way as the Ark of the Covenant was concealed in the Holy of Holies in the Temple of Jerusalem, or as the religious paraphernalia of gods and goddesses were hidden from common view in the cella of a Greek temple. In the Cherokee temple, there was a flag outside the narrow entrance portico, and painted standards with calendrical symbols of the sun and moon attached to the posts inside. Along with Katius, the half-sphere temple of light, the word Elo may also have Greek roots. Cognate with the Doric alan, be driven, Eloi can be taken to signify wanderers. Homer, whose works were learned by rote by schoolchildren, and who was often quoted in the ancient world, uses the related word Allah of Odysseus, wandering or roaming without home or hope of rest. This interpretation fits with the name of the ancestral land in Cherokee legends, Elohi Mona, for Mona can also be read as strict Doric Greek. Mona, abiding place, a place to stay in. Hence, the name preserved in Cherokee songs seems to mean place where the wanderers tarried. Could the other untranslated word in the treatise, Cherokee, also be Greek? The author recalls a remark by Paul Russell, a Potawatomi, Shawnee Cherokee elder, who was one of his teachers. Nobody really knows where the name Cherokee comes from. It's odd that the Cherokee Warrior Society always pronounces it Cherokee, with an S and H. Members of the Warrior Society, which still flourishes in parts of Tennessee and North Carolina, distinguish themselves in this way from the overarching tribe, the Cherokee, with its TS sound. Cherokee, which specifically refers to the warrior caste, and is, after all, the foundation of vision of the Elohi, is the same word as the Greek Etholoki, willing settlers, colonizers. The TH sound of the Greek is replaced by an SH sound. Cherokee, like many Native American languages, has no exact equivalent to a TH sound. Cherokee is evidently a proper name for those who joined the travels across the face of the earth, or Elohi, the crew members, conscripts, and other members of an expedition. Such a derivation may explain why the customary name for the Cherokee, Cherokee, famously resists all efforts to etymologize it. In the form Cherokee, according to anthropologists, it designates people of foreign speech. This common explanation rests on a lingua franca of the southeastern Indians called Choctaw trade jargon. But that interpretation begs a question. There are other etymologies, although none is capable of being analyzed into elements of the Cherokee language. According to the author of a recent grammatical study of Oklahoma Cherokee, Brad Montgomery Anderson, there are several beliefs about the origin of the name Cherokee, but it appears that the word itself is not a native Cherokee word. The names used for Cherokee people by their neighbors and surrounding Indian nations vary widely. The Seneca and other northern tribes call them cave people. Oyatakia, others, record keepers, still others including themselves, dog people. Currently, Cherokee is spoken as their primary language by fewer than 100 human beings on the planet, nearly all of them rural Oklahomans, well advanced in years. Most people, if asked today, would probably take the position, as do linguists, that it is the sole representative of the southern branch of the Iroquoian family of languages. If, however, as the linguists believe, Cherokee split off from a Proto-Iroquoian language at a distant remove in time equal about to the divide that separates descendants of Swiss or Bavarian Low German from Standard High German, or Czech from Polish, or French from Provençal, disturbing questions arise about the relationship of Cherokee and other Iroquoian languages. Why are the two languages not mutually intelligible? A Cherokee speaker has the same odds of being understood by a Haudenosaunee or Mohawk speaker as a Russian by a Vietnamese or Anglo-Saxon warlord by a BBC newscaster. Why does Mohawk have 2 or 3 times as many words as Cherokee? Why does Cherokee have a radically different syntax and grammar from Mohawk? Compared to Mohawk, Cherokee is so stripped bare and simple it comes across as pidgin English. Could that simplicity be illusory?